The last thing Deanna Zimmerman expected when she walked into Xavier Preston's downtown office at 11:30 at night was to find him bent over architectural blueprints with his sleeves rolled up and exhaustion etched into every line of his face. She had been hired 3 weeks ago as the project coordinator for Preston Development's newest venture, a mixed-use complex that would transform an entire city block into affordable housing with ground-floor community spaces. It was ambitious, it was necessary, and it was drowning in red tape and complications. Deanna had left the office at 7, fully intending to sleep, but anxiety about the zoning meeting scheduled for 8 the next morning had driven her back. She needed to review the revised proposals one more time, to make absolutely certain they had covered every possible objection the city council could raise. What she had not expected was to find the CEO himself still there, looking like he had not moved in hours. Xavier glanced up when she entered and something flickered across his expression. Surprise, maybe, or relief. "You are back," he said, his voice rough with fatigue. "I could not sleep," Deanna admitted, setting her bag down on one of the conference room chairs. "I kept thinking about the environmental impact section. I wanted to make sure we had enough data on the green roof benefits." She paused, studying him in the harsh fluorescent light. "Have you been here this whole time?" He straightened, pressing one hand to the small of his back with a grimace. "I needed to review the financial projections again. The numbers have to be airtight tomorrow, or we lose any chance of getting the council's approval." Diana moved closer to the table, looking down at the papers spread before him. Charts, graphs, cost breakdowns, all annotated in his precise handwriting. "You should have gone home," she said quietly. "You need rest before tomorrow, so do you." Xavier met her eyes, and for a moment, something passed between them that had nothing to do with zoning laws or construction timelines. He was handsome in that understated way some men achieved without effort. Dark hair slightly too long, strong jawline, eyes that were startlingly blue even under terrible office lighting. But it was more than that. In the 3 weeks she had worked for Preston Development, she had watched him fight for this project with a passion that went beyond profit margins. He genuinely cared about creating housing people could afford, about building community spaces that would serve the neighborhood for generations. "I will rest when we win this approval," Deanna said, pulling out a chair and sitting down across from him. "Show me what you are working on. 2 sets of eyes are better than 1. Xavier hesitated for only a moment before sliding half the papers across to her. "The construction timeline," he said. "I am trying to demonstrate we can complete Phase 1 within 18 months without cutting corners on quality or safety." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, occasionally asking questions or pointing out potential weaknesses in their arguments. Deanna found herself hyper-aware of his presence across the table, the way his brow furrowed when he concentrated, the way he absently ran his hand through his hair when he hit a problem he could not immediately solve. "Why this project?" she asked suddenly, looking up from a spreadsheet. "You could build luxury condos and make 3 times the profit. Why fight this hard for affordable housing?" Xavier set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. "I grew up in a neighborhood not far from here," he said after a moment. "My mother worked 2 jobs to keep us in a tiny apartment that should have been condemned. Every winter, the heat barely worked. Every summer, the windows would not open properly. But it was what she could afford, and she was terrified we would lose even that if she complained to the landlord." He met Diana's gaze steadily. "When I made my first million, I promised myself I would build the kind of housing my mother deserved, places where families do not have to choose between paying rent and buying groceries." Deanna felt her chest tighten. That is why you took on the city council directly instead of just lobbying behind the scenes. They need to hear from someone who understands what is at stake, Xavier agreed. Not just dollar signs on a balance sheet, but actual lives that will be changed. You are a good man, Deanna said softly. He looked uncomfortable with the praise. I am a realistic man. There is plenty of profit to be made in affordable housing if you do it right. I am not a saint. You are staying up all night to make sure every detail is perfect so this project has the best possible chance tomorrow, Deanna pointed out. That goes beyond business. So are you, Xavier countered, but there was warmth in his voice now, something that made Deanna's pulse quicken. They returned to work, but the atmosphere had shifted somehow, become more intimate despite the institutional surroundings and harsh lighting. Around 2 in the morning, Diana got up to make coffee in the break room, and when she returned with 2 mugs, she found Xavier standing at the window, looking out over the sleeping city. It is beautiful from up here, he said without turning around. Easy to forget sometimes, when you are buried in paperwork and fighting with bureaucrats. Deanna handed him a mug and stood beside him, following his gaze. The city lights stretched out below them, a constellation of amber and white against the darkness. My father used to say cities are like people, she said. They have their flaws and their beauty all mixed together, and you have to love both to really understand them. Your father sounds wise. He was. Deanna smiled despite the old ache. He died when I was 20. Heart attack. He never got to see me graduate from college or get this job. Xavier turned to look at her, his expression gentle. He would be proud of what you have become. I hope so. She took a sip of coffee, grateful for the warmth. I almost did not take this position, you know. I had another offer from a firm that does corporate development. It paid more. Why did you choose us? Because when I researched Preston Development, I found that article you wrote for the City magazine about sustainable urban development and social responsibility. You actually meant it. That matters to me. I am glad you came, Xavier said, and there was something in his voice that made Deanna look up sharply, but he had already turned back to the window. They stood there in silence for a while, drinking coffee and watching the city sleep. Deanna was intensely aware of how close they were standing, how easy it would be to shift just slightly and have their shoulders touch. She told herself it was just exhaustion and nerves about tomorrow making her hyper-aware of him, but she knew it was more than that. She had been attracted to Xavier Preston from the first day she walked into his office for her interview, but she had carefully kept those feelings locked away where they belonged. He was her boss, and this project was too important to complicate with personal feelings. But standing here in the middle of the night with the city spread out below them and tomorrow's crucial meeting hanging over both their heads, it was harder to remember all the reasons she needed to maintain professional distance. We should get back to it, Xavier said finally, breaking the spell. Only a few more hours until dawn. They returned to the conference table and dove back into the documents, but now Deanna found herself stealing glances at him when she thought he was not looking. Once, she caught him doing the same, and they both quickly looked away, but not before she saw the faint color rising in his cheeks. Around 4:30, Diana found a potential problem in the parking allocation section. Xavier, look at this. We have accounted for resident parking and visitor spaces, but the city's new requirements mandate separate loading zones for delivery vehicles. We need to revise this entire section. He came around the table to look over her shoulder, and Diana caught the scent of his cologne, something clean and woodsy that made her want to lean closer. You are right, he said, frustration evident in his voice. How did we miss that? Because there are approximately 9 million details to track, Deanna said, already pulling up the relevant city codes on her laptop. "We can fix this. We just need to recalculate the space allocation." Xavier pulled his chair around next to hers so they could both see the screen, and they worked side by side, shoulders nearly touching, making adjustments and running new calculations. It took nearly an hour, but finally, they had a revised parking plan that met all requirements. "You just saved this project," Xavier said, turning to look at her. They were very close now, close enough that Diana could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes, the exhaustion and relief and something else warring in his expression. "We saved it," she corrected softly. "Together." For a moment she thought he might kiss her. The air between them felt charged, electric, and she found herself leaning in almost unconsciously. But then Xavier pulled back, running his hand through his hair in that gesture she was coming to recognize. "We should print out the new documents," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Make sure everything is ready for the presentation." Diana nodded, telling herself she was not disappointed that it was better this way. She went to the printer while Xavier gathered all their revised materials, and by the time the sky outside began to lighten with the first hints of dawn, they had everything organized and ready. "You should go home," Xavier said, glancing at his watch. "Get a shower and some breakfast. The meeting is not until 8. You have time." "What about you?" "I keep a change of clothes here," he admitted. "I will clean up in the executive bathroom and grab something from the cafe downstairs." Diana wanted to argue, to insist he needed real rest, but she could see the determination in his face. "Xavier," she said instead, stepping closer to him, "you stayed up all night to make sure this was perfect." "So did you," he pointed out, echoing their earlier exchange. "But you have to present it. You have to stand in front of the city council and sell them on this vision. You need to be sharp." He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his tired face. "I will be. Knowing we have done everything possible, that we have covered every angle because you came back and caught that parking issue, that gives me confidence. We are ready." Diana found herself smiling back. "We are ready," she agreed. She went home then, but she was too keyed up to sleep. She showered and changed into her most professional outfit, a navy suit that made her feel capable and put together. She forced herself to eat breakfast, though her stomach was in knots, and she arrived at City Hall 45 minutes early. Xavier was already there, standing outside the council chamber, looking refreshed and composed in a charcoal gray suit. His eyes lit up when he saw her, and he crossed the hallway in long strides. "You look ready to win this," she said. "We look ready," he corrected, and she realized he had included her in the presentation team. "I want you up there with me. You know this project as well as I do, maybe better. If they have questions about the logistics or the community impact data, you should be the one to answer." Diana's heart raced, but she nodded. She had not expected this, but she would not back down from it. "Okay, let us do this." The council chamber filled slowly. Local residents who supported the project, skeptical council members, reporters from the city's major newspapers. Diana sat beside Xavier at the presentation table. Their materials spread before them, and tried to calm her racing pulse. When their turn came, Xavier stood and began to speak, and Diana was struck again by his passion and conviction. He talked about housing security and community development, about the environmental benefits of their green building approach, about the economic impact of creating good jobs during construction, and beyond. He showed them the numbers, the projections, the careful planning that had gone into every aspect of the design. When a council member asked about parking, Diana stepped in smoothly with their revised plan, explaining how they had incorporated the new loading zone requirements while still providing ample resident and visitor spaces. When another raised concerns about the timeline, Xavier walked them through their phased approach, demonstrating how they could deliver results without rushing quality. They worked together seamlessly, anticipating each other's points, reinforcing each other's arguments. Deanna could see the council members beginning to lean forward, to look interested rather than skeptical. They were winning them over. The vote, when it came after an hour of questions and discussion, was not unanimous, but it was decisive. 7-2, in favor of approving Preston Development's project. Deanna felt Xavier's hand close around hers under the table, a brief squeeze of triumph and relief, and then they were standing, shaking hands with council members and supporters, accepting congratulations and promising to keep the community updated on progress. It was not until they were outside, standing on the City Hall steps in the bright morning sunshine, that the reality of what they had accomplished truly hit her. "We did it," she said, turning to Xavier with a wide smile. "We actually did it." "You did it," he said firmly. "If you had not come back last night, if you had not caught that parking issue, we would have been blindsided in there. They would have voted us down." "But I did come back," Deanna said, "because I believed in this project, because I believe in what you are trying to do." Xavier looked at her for a long moment. And now, in the daylight, with the pressure of the presentation behind them, she could see everything he had been holding back the night before in his eyes. "Deanna," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something, but I want you to know you can say no and it will not affect your job in any way. I mean that." Her heart was pounding again, but for an entirely different reason now. "Okay." "Last night," he began, then paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "When you walked into the office and found me there, I was relieved, not just because I needed the help, but because it was you specifically. I have been trying to maintain professional boundaries, to be your boss and nothing more, but the truth is I have not been able to stop thinking about you since the day I hired you." He took a breath. "You stayed up all night with me. You told me this morning that I stayed up, and I realized I was not counting the hours because I was with you. Time did not matter. Being exhausted did not matter. What mattered was working beside you, knowing we were building something important together." Deanna felt tears pricking at her eyes, but they were happy tears. "I felt the same way," she admitted. "I kept telling myself it was just about the project, that I was attracted to your passion for the work, but it is more than that. It is you. The way you care about people, the way you fight for what is right, the way you look when you are concentrating on a problem you are determined to solve." "Can I take you to dinner?" Xavier asked. "Tonight, if you are not too exhausted. Somewhere nice, where we can celebrate and talk about things that have nothing to do with zoning laws or construction timelines." "I would like that," Deanna said, and then, because they were standing outside City Hall in the sunshine with a major victory behind them and the future suddenly bright with possibility, she added, "I would like that very much." Xavier's smile was worth every sleepless hour. 7 o'clock. "I will pick you up." "It is a date," Deanna said, and the word hung between them, wonderful and terrifying and perfect. That evening, Deanna changed outfits 4 times before settling on a simple black dress that was elegant without being too formal. When Xavier arrived at her apartment precisely at 7, he was holding a bouquet of white roses and wearing an expression of such obvious admiration that she felt her cheeks flush. "You are beautiful," he said simply. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied, and he laughed. He took her to a small Italian restaurant tucked away on a quiet street, the kind of place that clearly was not about impressing people with its trendiness, but about serving exceptional food to people who appreciated quality. The owner greeted Xavier by name and led them to a corner table with candles and soft lighting. "You come here often," Deanna asked as they settled into their seats. My mother used to work here, Xavier said. When I was a kid, maybe 8 or 9, she would bring me with her sometimes when she could not afford a babysitter. The owner, Marco, he would let me do my homework in the back office and feed me pasta. When I made my first real money, this was one of the first places I came back to. I wanted to thank him. Did you? Deanna asked softly. I tried to write him a check, Xavier admitted with a self-deprecating smile. He tore it up and told me the only thanks he wanted was for me to keep coming back and to remember to help other kids the way he helped me. I like him already, Deanna said. You would love him. He is cooking tonight, actually. I called ahead. The food, when it came, was extraordinary, but Deanna barely tasted it. She was too focused on Xavier, on the conversation that flowed easily between them now that they were not talking about work. She learned that he had played basketball in high school but quit when he realized he would never be tall enough for a college scholarship, and decided to focus on academics instead. He learned that she had wanted to be an architect but switched to urban planning when she realized she was more interested in how buildings fit into communities than in the buildings themselves. You ever regret it? He asked. The path not taken? No, Deanna said thoughtfully. I think we end up where we are supposed to be. I would not have found Preston Development if I had gone into architecture. I would not be part of this project that is going to change lives. I would not have met you, Xavier added quietly. Their eyes met across the table, and Diana felt that electric charge again, stronger now without the buffer of professional boundaries between them. This morning, you said you were not counting the hours, she said. I want you to know that is exactly how I felt too. I looked up at one point and was surprised to see it was almost 3 in the morning because it felt like we had just started working. Time moves differently when you are with the right person, Xavier said. Everything else just fades away. They talked until the restaurant began to empty around them, until Marco himself came out of the kitchen to chat, and to insist they try his special tiramisu. When Xavier finally drove Deanna home, it was past midnight, and she realized with a start that they had stayed up together again, but this time for entirely different reasons. I do not want this night to end, she admitted as they stood outside her apartment building. It does not have to, Xavier said. I mean, not like that. I just mean, this is not a one-time thing for me, Deanna. I want to see where this goes. I want more nights like this, more conversations that make me lose track of time. So do I, Deanna said. But we need to be smart about this. We work together. The project is just starting and there are going to be challenges ahead. We need to keep personal and professional separate. Agreed, Xavier said immediately. At work, we are colleagues, full stop. But outside of work, I want to take you to dinner and learn everything about you and hopefully convince you that I am worth your time. Deanna laughed. I think you have already accomplished that last part. He kissed her then, finally, a gentle kiss that felt like a promise and a beginning. When they pulled apart, Deanna was breathless and smiling. 7 o'clock tomorrow, Xavier asked. Different restaurant, same excellent company. Make it 7:30, Deanna countered. I want time to go home and change after work. 7:30 it is. They dated for the next 3 months, while the Preston Development project moved from approval through the early stages of construction. True to their agreement, they kept things professional during work hours, though Deanna caught Xavier watching her sometimes with that soft expression that made her heart flutter. They had dinner together at least 4 times a week, and on weekends they explored the city together, finding new restaurants and walking through parks and talking about everything and nothing. Deanna met Xavier's mother, a warm woman with her son's blue eyes and a quick laugh, who hugged Deanna tightly and whispered, I have not seen him this happy in years. Xavier met Diana's younger sister Rebecca, who pulled Diana aside and said, "If you do not marry this man, I will be personally offended." "It has only been 3 months," Diana protested, but her heart was racing because she had been thinking the same thing. The project hit its first major snag in month 4, when the primary contractor they had hired suddenly declared bankruptcy and walked away from the job. Diana arrived at work to find Xavier already in crisis mode, on the phone with their legal team and looking grimmer than she had seen him since before the city council approval. "How bad is it?" she asked when he finally hung up. "Bad. We need to find a new contractor immediately, or we lose our construction window. We start hitting winter weather in 6 weeks, and if we cannot get the foundation completed before then, we are delayed until spring." Diana pulled up her laptop. "Then we find someone. Give me your top 3 backup options, and I will start making calls." They spent the next week in intensive negotiations, bringing in contractor after contractor to tour the site and submit bids. It was stressful and exhausting, and more than once Diana wanted to just give up and accept the delay. But Xavier never wavered, and his determination kept her going. "We will find someone," he said one evening as they sat in his office reviewing yet another inadequate proposal. "We have to." "What if we do not?" Diana asked quietly. "What if we have to accept the delay?" Xavier looked at her seriously. "Then we accept it and we come back stronger in the spring, but we are not there yet. We keep fighting." They found their answer in an unexpected place. Marcus Chen, a contractor who had submitted a bid on the original project but lost out to the company that went bankrupt, called Xavier directly. "I heard what happened," he said. "My company has completed the job we were working on ahead of schedule. We can start on yours next week if you want us." Xavier put the call on speaker so Diana could hear. "Your original bid was 20% higher than what we budgeted," he said carefully. "That was before," Marcus said. "I have been following your project, Preston. I like what you are doing. I will match your original contractor's price if you give me the job." Diana and Xavier looked at each other. "Why?" Xavier asked. "Because I grew up in housing like you are building," Marcus said simply. "I want to be part of making it happen." They hired Marcus Chen's company that afternoon, and within a week, construction was back on track. Diana celebrated by cooking dinner for Xavier at her apartment, the first time she had attempted anything domestic in their relationship. "This is really good," Xavier said, looking surprised as he tasted her chicken piccata. "You do not have to sound so shocked," Diana said, laughing. "I can cook. I just usually do not have time." "I am making time," Xavier said. For you, for us." "Diana, these past 4 months have been the happiest of my life, and that includes the stress and the setbacks. I wake up every morning excited because I know I am going to see you. I go to sleep thinking about you. You have become the most important part of my world." Diana set down her fork, her heart pounding. "Xavier, I feel the same way." "Move in with me," he said suddenly. "I know it is fast. I know we said we would be smart and careful, but I do not want to be apart from you anymore. I want to have dinner together every night, not just 4 times a week. I want to wake up next to you. I want to build a life with you, not just a project." Diana thought about all the reasons she should say no, should slow down, should be cautious. But the truth was, she was already sure. She had been sure since that night they stayed up together working, maybe even since before that. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will move in with you." Xavier stood and pulled her into his arms, and they kissed like people who knew they had just made a decision that would change their lives. Diana moved into Xavier's downtown loft 2 weeks later. It was a spacious place with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the same view they had looked at together that night months ago. She brought her books and her favorite chair, and the painting her father had given her, and Xavier made space for all of it without hesitation. "This is your home too," he said firmly. "I want you to feel like it is yours." Living together was easier than Diana had expected. They fell into a comfortable rhythm, sharing cooking duties and grocery shopping and lazy Sunday mornings reading the newspaper together. They still kept their relationship quiet at work, not because they were hiding exactly, but because they both agreed the project should be the focus of office attention, not their personal lives. But 6 months into living together, Xavier called an all-staff meeting and Diana felt her stomach drop, worried that something had gone wrong with the construction or the financing. Instead, Xavier stood at the front of the conference room and said, "I want everyone to know that Diana Zimmerman and I are in a relationship. We have been together for 10 months now, and she has been living with me for the past 6. I am making this announcement because I do not want there to be any questions about favoritism or inappropriate conduct. Diana is the best project coordinator I have ever worked with, and she earned her position and every promotion and raise she receives through her talent and dedication. But I also love her and I will not hide that anymore." The room was silent for a moment and then applause broke out. Their colleague Jennifer called out, "It is about time. We have all been wondering when you two would stop pretending you were just co-workers." "You knew?" Diana asked, mortified. "Everyone knew," another colleague said, grinning. "You two look at each other like you are the only people in the room." After the meeting, Xavier found Diana in her office. "I should have asked you first before making that announcement," he said. "I am sorry. I just could not keep pretending anymore." "I am not upset," Diana assured him. "I am relieved, actually. It was getting harder to act like you are just my boss when all I want to do is kiss you." Xavier grinned and closed the office door before doing exactly that. The project was completed on schedule 18 months after they broke ground, exactly as Xavier had promised the city council. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was on a beautiful spring morning, with local residents and city officials and media all gathered to celebrate. Diana stood beside Xavier as he gave his speech, talking about community and opportunity and the future, and she felt tears gathering in her eyes. This was what they had fought for, what they had stayed up all night working on, what had brought them together in the first place. After the ceremony, after the congratulations and the interviews and the tours, Xavier took Diana's hand and led her away from the crowd, to a quiet courtyard they had designed as part of the community spaces. "I have something to ask you," he said, and Diana's breath caught because she could see in his eyes what was coming. Xavier pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and dropped to one knee right there in the courtyard of the building they had created together. "Diana Zimmerman, you walked into my office on a night when I was exhausted and overwhelmed, and you changed my life. You stayed up with me. You worked beside me. You believed in this project and in me. You made me realize that time does not matter when you are with the right person, that hours can feel like minutes, and that love can grow in the middle of blueprints and zoning codes and city council meetings. I was not counting the hours that night because being with you was all that mattered. It is still all that matters. Will you marry me?" Diana was crying now, happy tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she said. "Yes, absolutely yes." Xavier slid the ring onto her finger and stood to kiss her, and Diana heard applause again. She turned to see that their entire construction crew and office staff had followed them to the courtyard, that everyone had been in on this plan. "You are all terrible secret keepers," she said, laughing through her tears. "We are very good at keeping secrets," Jennifer countered. "We kept yours for 10 months. The wedding was 6 months later, a small ceremony in the same Italian restaurant where Xavier had taken Diana on their first date. Marco insisted on catering, and Xavier's mother cried through the entire ceremony, and Diana's sister Rebecca was her maid of honor and gave a speech about how she knew from the moment she met Xavier that he was the one. "To Diana and Xavier," Rebecca said, raising her glass, "who prove that the best love stories start with two people who are willing to stay up all night working toward a shared dream." They honeymooned in Italy, spending 2 weeks eating amazing food and touring historical sites, and making love in hotel rooms with views of ancient cities. But Diana's favorite moments were the quiet ones, sitting with Xavier at a cafe or walking through a piazza at sunset, just being together without any pressure or deadlines or expectations. "I could do this forever," she said one evening as they watched the sun set over Florence. "We will," Xavier promised. "Maybe not in Italy every day, but together, always together." When they returned home, they threw themselves back into work. Preston Development had 3 new projects in development, all following the model of the first, creating affordable housing with community spaces in neighborhoods that desperately needed it. Diana had been promoted to senior project manager, overseeing all 3 developments, and Xavier had been approached by the mayor's office about joining a task force on urban housing policy. "You should do it," Diana said when he told her about the offer. "You have a platform now. Use it to make real change." "Only if you join me," Xavier said. "They want people who have actually done this work, not just theorized about it. You are as much a part of this as I am." They joined the task force together, spending evenings in community meetings and strategy sessions, working to influence policy at the city and eventually state level. It was exhausting and often frustrating, but it was also deeply rewarding to see their ideas being implemented, to know they were part of something larger than any individual project. 2 years into their marriage, Diana discovered she was pregnant. She told Xavier over breakfast on a Saturday morning, handing him a wrapped box with a positive pregnancy test inside. Xavier stared at it for a long moment, then looked up at her with wonder in his eyes. "We are having a baby." "We are having a baby," Diana confirmed, and then she was in his arms, both of them crying and laughing at the same time. Their daughter, Elena, was born on a snowy January morning, 7 pounds and 3 ounces of perfection. Xavier cried when he held her for the first time, and Diana took a picture of the 2 of them together, her strong, capable husband cradling their tiny daughter with such tenderness it made her heart ache. "She's going to change the world," Xavier whispered. "Just like her father," Diana said softly. They adjusted to parenthood with the same teamwork they brought to everything else. Xavier took paternity leave and learned to change diapers and give bottles, and Diana worked from home as much as possible in those early months. They were exhausted all the time, but it was a different kind of exhaustion than that night in the office so many years ago. This was the exhaustion of joy, of love, of building a family together. When Elena was 6 months old, Diana went back to work full-time, and Xavier surprised her by announcing he was scaling back his hours. "I want to be there for her," he explained. "I want to be the kind of father who makes it to dance recitals and soccer games, not the kind who is always at the office. My mother sacrificed everything for me because she had to. I do not have to make that choice, and I will not." "You are going to be an amazing father," Diana said, kissing him. "You already are." Preston Development continued to grow, but Xavier was deliberate about maintaining balance. He hired a managing director to handle day-to-day operations and focused his own time on the big picture vision and the policy work he and Diana were doing with the city. Their second daughter, Sophie, was born 3 years after Elena, and their son, Marcus, named after the contractor who had saved their first project, came 2 years after that. The day Marcus turned 1, Deanna and Xavier stood in the courtyard of their first project, the one that had brought them together, and watched their 3 children play on the grass. "You ever think about that night?" Deanna asked, leaning against Xavier's shoulder. "The night I came back to the office and found you there. All the time," Xavier said. "It was the night that changed everything. If you had not come back, if we had not stayed up together working through everything, we would have failed that presentation. But more than that, I would not have realized what I was feeling for you. I would have kept it buried under professionalism and distance. You told me the next morning that you were not counting the hours," Deanna said. "I have thought about that so many times over the years. It was true then, and it is true now. Time does not matter when I am with you. Hours feel like minutes. Years feel like moments." Xavier turned to pull her into his arms, kissing her with the same passion and tenderness he had shown her from the beginning. "I love you," he said. "I will love you for all the hours we have left, however many that is." "Forever," Deanna said. "We have forever." They stood there in the courtyard they had designed, watching their children play in the community they had built. And Diana felt overwhelmingly grateful for that sleepless night so many years ago. Grateful that she had not been able to sleep, that she had driven back to the office, that she had found Xavier bent over blueprints with exhaustion in his eyes and determination in every line of his body. She had stayed up with him. She had told him in the morning, commenting on how he had stayed up, and he had not been counting the hours. And in not counting those hours, they had found something infinitely more valuable than a successful project or a city council approval. They had found each other. 20 years after that night, Preston Development had built over 50 affordable housing projects across 3 states. Xavier and Diana were recognized nationally as leaders in sustainable urban development and housing policy. But their proudest accomplishments were not the awards or the recognition, or even the thousands of families who had stable, affordable homes because of their work. Their proudest accomplishments were Alina, who was studying architecture and planned to join the family business after graduation. Sophie, who wanted to be a teacher and work in the communities they built. Marcus, who at 15 was already designing community gardens and talking about urban farming initiatives. "We did okay," Xavier said one evening as they sat on their balcony, watching the sun set over the city they loved. "We did more than okay," Deanna corrected, taking his hand. "We built a life together, a real life full of love and purpose and meaning." "Starting from one sleepless night," Xavier mused. "The best sleepless night of my life," Deanna said. Xavier turned to look at her, his blue eyes still as striking as they had been that night in the office, though now there was silver in his dark hair and laugh lines around his mouth. "Mine too. I would stay up 1,000 more nights if it meant spending them with you." "Good thing you are not counting them then," Deanna teased. And Xavier laughed, that warm, genuine laugh she had fallen in love with so many years ago. They sat together as the sky darkened and the city lights began to glow below them. 2 people who had found each other in the middle of the night and built something beautiful together. Their story had started with architectural blueprints and zoning codes, with exhaustion and determination, and a shared commitment to making their city better. But it had become something so much more than that. It had become a love story, a family story, a story about what was possible when 2 people were willing to work together toward a common dream. Diana leaned her head on Xavier's shoulder and felt his arm come around her, solid and warm and steady. After all these years, after all the projects and challenges and triumphs and sleepless nights with sick children and stressful deadlines, this was still her favorite place to be, right here beside him, watching the city they loved together. "What are you thinking about?" Xavier asked softly. Everything, Deanna said. That night in the office, our first date, the day we moved in together, our wedding, the births of our children, all the projects we have built and all the lives we have changed. I am thinking about how lucky I am. We are both lucky, Xavier corrected. To have found each other, to have built this life together. You ever wonder what would have happened if I had not come back to the office that night? Deanna asked. If I had just stayed home and tried to sleep? Xavier was quiet for a moment, considering. I think we would have found each other anyway, he said finally. Maybe not that night, but eventually. Some things are meant to be. You are a romantic, Deanna said, smiling. Only with you, Xavier replied, kissing the top of her head. They sat there until the stars came out, talking quietly about their children and their plans for the future, and the new project Deanna was spearheading across the river. But mostly they just sat together, comfortable in the silence that only came from decades of love and partnership. Inside, they could hear Alina video calling from college, her voice bright with excitement about a design project she was working on. Sophie was practicing piano, the notes floating out through the open windows. Marcus was probably in his room, sketching out plans for something ambitious and idealistic and entirely achievable. If Deanna and Xavier had taught him anything, this was their life. The life they had built together from that single sleepless night. And it was more than Deanna had ever dreamed possible. When she was a young project coordinator who could not sleep before a crucial presentation and decided to go back to the office one more time. She had found Xavier there, working through exhaustion and determination. She had stayed up with him through the night, and in the morning, when she had commented on how he had stayed up preparing everything, he had not been counting the hours, because time stopped mattering when you found the right person. Because love was not measured in hours or days or even years, but in moments like this. Quiet moments on a balcony at sunset, with your life's partner beside you and your children safe inside, and the knowledge that you had built something meaningful together. I love you, Deanna said, not for the first time that day and certainly not the last. I love you too, Xavier replied, his voice warm with the certainty that came from 2 decades of proving that love every single day. Always have, always will. And as the city lights sparkled below them and their family's laughter and music filled their home, Deanna knew with absolute certainty that staying up that night, working beside Xavier until dawn, had been the best decision of her life. Not because it had saved their project, though it had. Not because it had launched their careers or led to all their successes, though it had done that too, but because it had led her here. To this moment, this life, this love. To Xavier, who still looked at her like she was the most important person in his world. To their children, who were growing into remarkable human beings. To a partnership that had weathered every storm and celebrated every triumph and remained as strong as ever. She had stayed up with him. He had not been counting the hours. And together, they had built forever.